listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in and glad to have you with me. Thank you for being here as well. LSU, they are on bye week number 2 here in the 2024 season. Of course, this is LSU's more traditional bye, the week before Alabama comes to town. And they have things to work on. They have to get healthy. And ultimately, it feels like this bye week comes at a really good time for LSU. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Brian Kelly was on the Paul Feinbaum Show, his weekly Monday hit earlier this week. And he also kind of talked about the thing that needs to be cleaned up most before LSU welcomes in Alabama. And he gave an early thought on the game and on the bye week as well. So we'll let you hear what the coach had to say. And while he gives his early look at Alabama, we will take a very early look at Alabama. So, again, glad to have you with me. Thank you for being here. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, all of those things. Greatly appreciated and very important. Follow me on social media at Musso Matthew on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook. Of course, you can find me on Instagram as well. That's at Matthew Musso1. Love the interaction. Love to hang out and chat during games and all those types of things as well. All right. As mentioned off the top, Brian Kelly had his weekly appearance on the Paul Feinbaum Show on Monday afternoon. And as you might expect, a large majority of that conversation revolved around the Texas A&M game still. I don't really want to rehash much more, about the game itself. I mean, we did that on Monday for about 33 minutes. But, Kelly again talked about Marcel Reed and not being properly prepared there, which is still just incredibly disappointing. The preparation from this team had been on point all throughout the season. Did not expect something like that to happen, but it did. It's in the rearview mirror now. Said my piece on that on Monday, and you move on. You have a important bye week and a massively important game a week from Saturday. But he talked about that. Again, he talked about the lack of running game and all of those things. What I'm much more interested in is moving forward. As I kind of just said, it's in the past, and you have a big important game coming up and a very important bye week here as well. So let's start there, right? Bye week. It's interesting with 2 in the season, and I told y'all when LSU was on their first bye, I love the 2 bye weeks in a season. I wish they would make that a regular thing in college football, quite honestly, especially with them adding more games and an expanded playoff and all those things. They always, preach player safety, even though their actions always speak louder than their words. I think 2 bye weeks would be great as a mandatory deal throughout college football, especially, like I said, as the season continues to only get longer. So big fan of that. And you'll remember on LSU's first bye week, they really treated it as a work week. The LSU didn't use that rest and recover. They had finished up their non-conference slate, and they were set to go into 7 straight SEC games with Ole Miss coming into Tiger Stadium. And they had some things that they really needed to clean up. And at that point, it was specifically really on the defensive side of the ball. And you wanted to get the running game going and all those types of things. But LSU used that as a work week. And Brian Kelly, when he talked about that, said, we'll use the second bye, the more traditional bye, as more of the rest and recovery and things of that nature. But it is undeniable, after watching the game against Texas A&M, that LSU still has things to clean up. Now, look, you're going into the month of November. How much of that can you actually clean up in this part of the season and get going? I mean, you've played 8 games. That's a large sample size. That's more than half of your season. It's 2/3 of your season. An argument can absolutely be made that you are what you are. But nonetheless, Paul Feinbaum, he asked Brian Kelly, heading into the Alabama game, you have a couple weeks to prepare. What is the thing that needs to be cleaned up most?
This comes back to fundamentals and coaching of the quarterback and being disciplined and doing the things necessary. And that zero is an okay play, but not turning it over. And so that goes back to the coaching, the teaching, the discipline of the position. And Garrett is a smart kid. He's trying to do too much. And, we've got to give him, as I mentioned in my remarks after the game, we've got to give him a little bit more help. I mean, our running game's got to be better. It's got to give him the balance that, he doesn't have to feel like he's got to sling it every down out there. And again, I think in most instances, you want the kind of balance necessary where he doesn't have to be throwing it, 45 times a game.
And notice, he didn't mention the defense. And I don't really blame him for not mentioning the defense. They've been really good the last few weeks. The last 5 weeks, really. Saturday, the second half sucked. But your defense has played one bad half of football in, what, more than a month? 5 weeks? And it's because they weren't properly prepared for it. So, yeah, that's fine not mentioning the defense there to me. It should kind of all be on the offensive side after what you saw. And including after what you saw a little bit at Arkansas. You fell on hard times there in the middle of that game offensively, and you came alive late again. Against Ole Miss, you got off to a really slow start offensively, came alive late, made the plays to win the game. Against Texas A&M, you got off to a pretty quick start, jumped out 10-0 on your first 3 drives. But after that, you only scored 2 touchdowns the rest of the game. And it comes back to the balance on the offense. And that's where it's just like, man, but are you what you are? Is LSU ever going to be able to figure out the running game this season? I don't know the answer to that. But it doesn't mean you quit trying. And that's something that they absolutely have to do. And then, yes, the fundamentals of coaching Garrett Nussmeier at the quarterback position and not turning the football over. And y'all, I'm here to tell you right now, turnovers are going to be a huge part of this game against Alabama. They've been a huge part of LSU's last 2 games in general, and they're going to be a huge part of this one as well. Alabama is +7 in the turnover margin this season. They have forced 18 turnovers on the season. That +7 ranks 17th in the country. You look at LSU, they're hanging right around where they have always been really this year at +2, which is not a bad place to be, but Alabama has that advantage over you. 100%. They have that advantage over you. Yes, Jaylen Milaro has been careless with the football at times the last 5 weeks. All 6 of his interceptions have come in the last 5 weeks. But in the last 3 weeks, there's been some questionable decisions made by Garrett Nussmeier. Yeah, you can look at the deep shot they took against Ole Miss right after LSU got the football on a turnover. They give it right back. One play. Nuss throws it into double coverage. It's intercepted. You look at, obviously, the 2, really all 3 of the interceptions against Texas A&M. None of those were good decisions. Rolling out, throwing back across his body into the middle of the field, trying to make an impossibly long throw that was covered in the outside the numbers, and then that screen pass that got sniffed out. Decision making has to be better. And we talked about this a little bit in the recap on Monday, and like I said, I don't want to rehash everything, but yes, Garrett needs balance on the offense. He needs more of a running game. He needs to be helped out 100%. He also has to understand, don't make bad decisions. Like, that first interception he threw was an atrocious decision, and it's inexcusable. You were up 10 points on the road deep in your own territory. Throw the ball away. That's what Brian Kelly's saying there. A 0 is a good play. Just don't turn it over. That's going to be huge in this football game with Alabama, because that is one advantage. Alabama's defense had been great this season. They've been really good at taking the football away and protecting it on offense. And you just can't help them out any. They're not as strong as they have been in the past, but you still can't help them out any. So, yes, balance on offense, turnovers. That is what needs to be cleaned up most. And they have this bye week to do some work on that and try to do it while rest and recovery. Now, Brian Kelly also gave an early thought on the Alabama game and, again, the bye week.
We understand, the things that we have to work on and be better at, on both sides of the ball and in special teams. The version that I believe is going to play is the version that came out physically and mentally prepared to play A&M, that was up by double digits in a very difficult place to play. And we need to build on that. That's the version of LSU that needs to play against Alabama, but he needs to do it for 4 quarters. So we'll go back to work on this bye week. We'll work on those things that gives us the opportunity to play that kind of football, not for 70% of the game, but for 100% of the game.
So, yes, here we are again, right, talking about closing out games, and it looked like they had really put that behind them, especially over the last month and some change there, but it reared its ugly head again against Texas A&M for all the reasons that we've gone through. So, yes, obviously, get back to playing 4 quarters. You'll work on that over the bye week. And I don't disagree with him. And we kind of alluded to this on Monday about the Alabama game, and specifically with the running quarterback deal. It's like, yes, Jaylen Milaro is coming in, and Jaylen Milaro is a dynamic athlete at the quarterback position and one of the best runners, if not the best running quarterback in the country. But there have been times this year where he's been a sitting duck back there. Like, it's impacted his rush yards. In 8 games, Jaylen Milaro is averaging 47.5 rush yards per game. Now, in 5 of those 8 games, he's been sacked multiple times. In 5 of the 8, he's been sacked multiple times. And because college football is stupid, they take that, they take a passing play, and when you lose yards on it like that as a quarterback, they take it out of your rush yardage. That's dumb. But that's what college football does. So that has hurt his rushing yards. He's only had one 100-yard game this season, but that came against Georgia, and he wasn't sacked at all in that football game. So he's still got that in him. But like Brian Kelly said, I expect the version of LSU's defense and the version of LSU to come out against Alabama like they did the last 5 weeks minus the second half against Texas A&M. And yes, I know, again, the running quarterback thing, that's where we started with this because that's what hurt them so bad against A&M. But outside of that, when LSU actually prepared for a running quarterback, they did pretty well. Gio Lopez is dynamic with his feet for South Alabama. Stopped him up. Jackson Dart's got some mobility. Bottled him up pretty good. Taylon Green, obviously, you shut him down. They had made improvements in that area. Now with 2 weeks to actually prepare, yes, I believe Blake Baker comes up with a great scheme, has his players ready to understand it, and LSU comes out ready to contain Jaylen Milaro. Offensively, you want to see the team the last 2 weeks that got off to the quick starts. 13-0 against Arkansas, 10-0 against A&M. What you have to do is be able to sustain it more. And there is opportunity against this Alabama defense. Oh, is there opportunity against this Alabama defense? Y'all, Alabama, they've lost 2 games this season. In those losses, they have allowed 32 points per game. And I get it. That's a small sample size. So here's a bigger one. Versus conference opponents, Alabama has allowed 24 points per game. Might not sound like a lot, but when you consider would you consider the defense that Nick Saban rolled through that place for more than a decade and a half? That's a major, major jump. Alabama has allowed 40. Alabama has allowed 34 in conference. You could score on them yardage-wise, through the air in conference play. Alabama is allowing 238 point yards per game. Call it 240. You can round that up. 240 yards through the air in conference play. Y'all, Carson Beck got them for 439. The difference in that game, he turned the ball over 3 times. He turns the ball over once and throws for 439. Georgia wins that football game. Diego Pavia threw for 252, so right around that average, 2 touchdowns. He didn't turn the ball over, and they were able to win the football game. Now, the other part of that is he made great plays with his feet as well. And that brings you to rushing. And this is the most shocking thing to see of all when it comes to Alabama. Again, just remembering what the standard on defense was at that place. Alabama ranked 69th in the country in rush defense. But again, if you look at it in their losses, they've allowed 190 yards per game on the ground in their 2 losses. Versus conference foes in general, 151.8 yards. Again, call it 152. So when Brian Kelly tells you balance on offense is going to be key, he's talking about the run game. LSU has to be able to run the football to win this game. Because if Alabama can stop the run, stop me if you've heard this before, if Alabama can stop LSU's run, they can drop into coverage, make life difficult on Garrett Nussmeier. LSU will shy away from it and become one-dimensional and have him throw the ball 45, 50 times a game. And Alabama already has a defense, like we said, that can really force turnovers. And that can be ugly for you. Look at the Georgia game. Georgia ran for 80 yards, and they turned the ball over 4 times. 3 of those were interceptions. Then, look at Vanderbilt and look at Tennessee. Vanderbilt ran the ball against Alabama for 166 yards. They actually completely dominated Bama on the ground. And they didn't turn the football over. And they put up 40. Look at Tennessee against Alabama this season. Tennessee ran the football for 214 yards. Now, the outlier there is they did turn the ball over 3 times, but context matters when it comes to that because Nico Iamaleava only had 1 of those interceptions. The other one was his backup, came in on 1 play when he went out and immediately threw the ball to the other team. And then the other one was a fumble. So context does matter a little bit in there. Nico, when he was healthy, ready to go in the game, he played really well having that complement of the running game. LSU is going to have to be able to run the football against Alabama. And this is something I'll repeat throughout. It doesn't have to be for 200 yards. Can you get me 130, 140? Can you give me 140, right below the average they allow in conference play? And if you do that, if you're LSU, you run for 140 or 150 against this team, I'm not asking for the world here. That'll allow you to get into everything else you want to do offensively. But you also need to diversify the running game. This inside zone with Caden Durham's right up the middle, time after time after time, isn't working. You got 2 weeks. What else can you get in there? What else can you work on? The other thing I'll say about the bye week, and we'll get out of here on this, I do think it comes at a really good time for LSU. The bye week can sometimes come at a bad time. It can sometimes come at a good time. You hear that all the time. LSU's coming off a really tough loss, and you're looking to bounce back. I think that matters. But mostly, for the first time this season, LSU is actually pretty banged up. And you can hopefully get yourself healthy. CJ Daniels is dealing, with the injury. He suffered it late in the Arkansas game. Tried to go against Texas A&M, played a little bit, but left the game and didn't return. Now you have a couple weeks to really rest him up, get him healthy, get him the treatment he needs, and get him back out there because he's a huge part to your passing game. That's a reliable target for Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Dellinger, same thing. Dellinger injured his ankle against Texas A&M and went into the locker room, got it retaped, came back out to start the second half in pads still, but on the stationary bike. He ultimately would never return into the game, though. The LSU radio broadcast actually listed him as probable to return, and he never did. With him being given a probable designation at that point in the game, hopefully it's not too severe. We haven't had an update. Brian Kelly meets with the media Tuesday evening. He will no doubt be asked about that. And with 2 weeks, hopefully you can rest Dellinger up and have him back, because that's a key cog in your offensive line. I mean, y'all, that's a senior who is playing on the inside of your line and has for the last 3-4 years. It's a big piece for you. Jordan Allen, while he hadn't played much since LSU's gotten to conference play, he's a depth piece. Dealing with turf toe, hopefully you can get him back healthy over this week as well. So you do have some nagging injuries there. Really for the first time this season that aren't just like, their season's over. I think the bye week comes at a good time for you there too. And like I said, you're coming off a bad loss, not a bad loss, you're coming off a tough loss, a gut-wrenching loss. This allows you a chance to refocus, really set yourself up for what's in front of you, and improve on things that ailed you in that loss that hopefully you can fix and be set to go with against Alabama when they come in here a week from Saturday. So I think the bye week's coming at a great time for LSU. All right, that wraps us up for today. Glad to have you with me. Thank you for being here. Be sure to subscribe, share, like, all of those things. Follow me on social media as well. Be here next time for more on LSU Daily.